Good day, Modise. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Couch.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
How is the lockdown in South Africa?
This has been the most challenging period, I think, in the history of the whole global economy, if you look at how things are going on. But we also want to give glory and honor to God for bringing us to this point, because it's helping us to review a number of ways that we've been doing and thinking about things like church and business and so forth.
Maybe before we can even go further, I need to express my gratitude. You happen to be the first business person we have spoken to from South Africa.
You're welcome, and I'm grateful for the opportunity as well.
Modise, you have been involved in business for quite some time. Would you briefly tell us your exposure in terms of business and entrepreneurship?
First and foremost, I must give honor and praise to God and the Lord Jesus Christ for allowing me to be born Black and African. And it is because of that I think I have gone the route of business and entrepreneurship. Had I been born differently, I doubt that I would have been a businessman and entrepreneur. So what happened is I was born into a working class family. My grandfather was actually the only person who was earning an income, and therefore my grandmother had to come up with ways to augment his income. And that way I was introduced to income generating activities. We used to cook sam and sell it to school kids. The school was just opposite our house. During winter, we would sell coal, we'll sell oranges, and during summer, we'll sell ice cubes, and also we'll sell apples and other fruit. So in that way, it was a struggle for survival, but it was also a school into entrepreneurship. And as I went on to high school, I began to also sell goods, sweets to my fellow students. I used to also sell during weekends in the trains, at bus stops and train stations. And later I discovered that I can also understand maths better than other kids in my class. So I began to help them with their homework and even give them some test answers when the teacher is not looking, to exchange some favors. And that obviously led into real cash. So I would sell my homework and my test answers to my schoolmates for cash. And so that's how I was gradually introduced into business. But as you know, that we at the time were in a very oppressive system of apartheid. And so my schooling was interrupted. And that also aided in my path of entrepreneurship, because then we had to survive to find ways of earning income. And so at the time, we did not call it garden services, but we clubbed with a few friends and we went and did some garden for people, whoever wanted our services. And that way, we managed to earn some living. And then as a good kid, you get told that you must study, get a education so that you can have a better life. So when things became better in the townships, I then went back and tried to study, but the repressive system of apartheid could not go ignored. So I also participated in the student activism of the time and with the repercussions that followed, and my schooling was interrupted. But that was also a blessing in disguise, because to try and survive, I then joined some of these multi-level marketing companies that I sold health and beauty products, and my selling skills were better honed at that time. And when things became better in South Africa and one was released from detention and so forth, and ANC was unbanned, I then joined an insurance company which aided me as well in understanding business, in understanding needs analysis of the targeted customers and so forth. And step by step, my skills through life experiences were enhanced that way into business and entrepreneurship. And obviously, I went into the formal economy and I started working for financial institutions where my skills were further honed around issues of finance and so forth. And, by God's grace, I, went up the ranks of the financial institutions to the point that at both institutions, I became the CEO of Africa Business and also public sector banking CEO. So that aided my understanding of business and how to position oneself first as an entrepreneur, but also as an intrapreneur working within a corporate sector. And so briefly, that's how I could say my exposure and experience around business was developed and also sharpened. Obviously, I continued studying part-time. I got my junior degree and obviously other qualifications up to MBA level. So both education, both life experiences and exposure combined to help. And obviously, the Lord was the central part of my development in those areas.
Interesting background you have given us there, Modise. Now, my next question, from your understanding, your exposure and your background, are entrepreneurs born or they are made?
That's a very interesting topic. It has been discussed over many, many years. It's like, are leaders made or leaders born? For me, I think it's both. There are people who have a natural knack for entrepreneurship. I remember one of the people I used to work for during the difficult times of apartheid. We used to buy coal from him and sell it, in the township. He had no education. He couldn't even sign his name. But he was one of the accomplished business people in my township because he had a natural flair for it. But also, entrepreneurs can be made, looking at my development and others that I know. So the answer is yes, they are born, and yes, they can be made.
Thanks very much for that. I'm going to be very particular with my next question. A lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and those that are already running, they tell you that it was not easy for them to raise seed capital. From your own experience, how difficult is it to raise seed capital? And I need to emphasize, I'm talking about seed capital, not working capital.
You remind me of my lecturer when I was doing what now they call business management. At that time, they used to call it business economics 101. He said capital seeks opportunity and not need. So that stayed with me for a while, to say, if you have a compelling proposition, you will not struggle to find people who would want to invest in that compelling proposition, whether it's seed capital or working capital or even expansion capital. It is the nature of the proposition and the returns that it gives the prospective investor that would aid them to decide whether they want to participate or not. Obviously, looking at the risks that are attendant. It's never easy to raise capital. One needs to think clearly and thoroughly about what's in it for the prospective investor. And a lot of us entrepreneurs, because we have a good idea and perhaps we are passionate about that idea, we think it would be easier to get people to invest in it. But for me, to be able to get money out of your bank or out of your pocket to put it in my care, I need to have ways and means that are compelling for you to realize that your money is safer and better with me than in your pocket or in your bank account. And I think that's the struggle that we as entrepreneurs often find ourselves to balance the needs of the prospective investor and our own passions.
My next question was going to ask you on working capital, but let me combine this with venture capitalism. I will be very clear to you that whilst I believe in South Africa you have got an established system in terms of venture capitalism, in Zimbabwe there are still challenges. So I would want you to take us through venture capitalism. How can one go about raising working capital, working with the venture capitalists?
Okay, firstly, the business model that one is working on plays a very crucial role to an investor, whether it's someone who has a higher appetite of risk, as we call them angel investors or venture capitalists, or people with a lower appetite for risk. So your business model is very, very important. So one needs to spend time thinking through the business model. And once you have cleared in your mind the type of income generation, the kind of cost, the kind of proposition you have to the market and the size of the market and all those difficult questions that go into the business plan, then one needs to then look at the potential investors who may be interested in that particular industry or that level of risk in terms of the business model that you are proposing to them. So there are many different types of venture capitalists who are willing to back up. Some may be willing to come in at initial stages of the business. You know, if it's a compelling idea, they may say, we want to get in early so that we can reap the benefits as the business grows. There are those who don't want to be involved in the green fields, but they want to be involved in what they call brown fields. It means it's a business that has been tested, that has perhaps gone a few miles or a few steps ahead, and they may be willing to invest in that type of a brownfield business. And then obviously, there are those who want to come at a tertiary level of a business development, where business has run its course, it has established itself, it has existing client base, and it has a proven product that the market is interested in. And for expansion purposes, or to get capital in to fund ongoing operations. Some investors may want to participate at that specific point of the business. So it is always important to match the business model, the risks that go with the business model, with the potential investor. There are those different types of investors. So one needs to do a bit of legwork to understand who are the investors who are interested in a particular point of the growth curve of the business that one is proposing.
Thanks very much for that. Now, when I was growing up and when I started getting involved in running some businesses, I've heard a lot people always saying cash flow is the lifeblood of every business. But we still have seen a lot of other businesses closing due to failure to effectively manage cash flows. What's your understanding, and how effective is it for one to manage your cash flow?
I think you are very right, and that's a very important question, because we have seen and experienced how a number of us fail because of mismanagement of cash flow. So it is very critical, firstly, to understand the different types of revenue that comes into the business, and whether is the top line revenue or is the gross profit or is the net profit. A number of us, we take turnover sometimes and equate it to the net profit or the gross profit. And so that becomes a challenge, in a number of businesses, where we find that people therefore mismanage cash flow. So it's important to understand your top line in terms of revenue or turnover. It's important to understand the timing of that revenue, to say, when does this money come in? How does it come in? To understand your cost of producing that turnover. In some cases, it's called cost of sales. For you to generate that revenue, how much do you need to pay for that revenue to come in? And also to understand your relationship with your suppliers, the type of credit you are able to get from them, whether they are able to allow you a 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day credit plan. You also need to understand your clients, the debtors that you may entertain, whether you are willing to sell on debt, and what is the time that you are willing to wait before the invoices are paid. So matching all those elements, it's very, very important to manage your cash flow in your business. As you correctly say, cash flow is a lifeblood of business. You may sit with a lot of stock, but if that stock cannot turn into cash, you are killing your business. So one needs to time the purchasing of stock, the quantity of stock that you need, similarly with the premises that you run your business from. Do they equate the type of business that you are doing? How is your relationship with the landlord if you don't own the property that you have? Looking at rates and taxes, and also the supply of services like water and electricity. What is your relationship with the municipality? Do they understand the cycles of your business and so forth, so that your business cycle is meshed together with the cash flow into your business, so that when it's effectively managed, then you are able to survive those downturns in terms of the cycle of your business.
Modise, you have been in the financial sector for a long time. You have also worked with a number of entrepreneurs and business people. What are some of the challenges that you have noticed and shortcomings that normally are associated with a lot of businesses?
There are, for me, there are basically three types of challenges that we have seen, with entrepreneurs. The first one is the passion that they have for the product or the business idea does not equate with the demand in the market. So it causes a lot of frustration that you have this idea, you know that it can work from your perspective, but there is not enough market research to check if there is an uptake or a demand or a potential demand for that product in the market. So that mismatch of the market appetite and the passion of the entrepreneur becomes one of the frustrating things. The second thing that is related to that is the articulation of the opportunity by the entrepreneur. They may have the idea in their heads, they may understand it innately, but you find that articulating it to a potential investor or even a client or even bank or bank credit people for that matter is not clear, and that causes another frustration to say the entrepreneur is unable to raise either seed capital or working capital or advancement capital because of lack of clear articulation of what it is that they want to do with that capital and how is that capital going to be repaid perhaps at a cost. So those are some of the challenges, and as I said, a number of entrepreneurs think that seed capital or raising capital is an issue. I have found, as I said with my professor who said, capital seeks opportunity and not need. I found that once the capitalist understands the opportunity, it is not easy for them to take the necessary risks and invest in that type of opportunity. And then the third challenge has been, adaptability or agility of the either business idea or business plan or product. You find that the market changes, and when the market changes, the business is not agile enough to change with the market, and you find that one is stuck or over-invested in a particular business idea or product. And when the market changes, the agility to change along with the market and maybe rebrand or rejig the product so that it can appeal to the market becomes a problem. Some get stuck in a particular location, and you find that the surroundings change and the business idea may still be relevant, but it no longer has appeal in that particular location, and therefore one needs to be agile enough to be able to pack up and go to a location where the product or the idea can still sell. So agility, adaptability, and being able to respond to change are some of the frustrations that you find with a number of entrepreneurs.
Modise, you have talked about the other business person you have dealt with who was not that much literate. But how important is it for one to have financial literacy when you are running a business?
People often joke about some leading business people who say, I'm not trained, financially, but I can pick up a phone and speak to an accountant if I need to understand finance. I could pick up a phone and speak to a lawyer if I want to understand business legalities and so on. Whereas that is true, but a basic understanding of finances is very important. And you find that even those people who run big businesses and have not been to school have schooled themselves or trained themselves in the understanding of money, how to make it, how to spend it, and how to save it or invest it. So they have that basic understanding. It may not be maybe in the finance speak that maybe those who are in corporate finance and so on would speak to it, but they've got that basic understanding of what business is. And a case in point is my father-in-law, who unfortunately is late, but he did not go to school, but he ran multiple businesses because he had the knack for it. He understood money. And I think one needs that basic understanding of money to be able to engage in business and business enterprise.
My next question then would focus on Africa as a whole. We have got a lot of entrepreneurs and business people, but we still have got aspiring business people who, if you talk to them, they would say they do not know where and how they can start and run businesses. What are the available opportunities that one can get into?
I often say Africa is open for business because of the plethora of business opportunities that I see. When one looks at the African landscape. So I believe that when one does, proper research in terms of the business opportunities that are out there, especially now than before, we have, an enabling environment where African governments are now speaking from different countries of intra-Africa trade. There are, business opportunities that get open in countries where before it was difficult to even trade with, So basic things like, import-export business opportunities, where one may identify that in my country, we are struggling with raw materials to make this or that particular product. Who is best placed within the continent to be able to supply that particular raw material? So it's called comparative advantage. So who has a comparative advantage to your own country with that particular product? Who are supplying currently, and is there a way of finding suppliers who are willing and able to supply that product at an cost-effective price, so that you can then put your margin and on-sell to your in-country manufacturers or so forth. So identifying those opportunities based on the trade flows that happen between countries could be one opportunity. Africa, has leapfrogged technology, as it were. I think in Africa we are, a few steps ahead than most countries because our youthful population has caught on to technology quite easy. And there are a number of opportunities that present themselves within the technology space. I've seen a number of proposals from various people with either applications or similar type of tech products that are coming on board. We've been talking of the fourth industrial revolution that Africa and the rest of the world is engaged in. So it's looking at those types of opportunities and say, do I have the skills? Do I have the passion? Do I have the competencies to participate in that type of business opportunity? And what are the costs? What are the risks? And in terms of the medium to long term sustainability of the business, and then one can take advantage of those. Obviously, every business opportunity comes with its risks. And as the adage goes, the higher the risks, the higher the return. And people say Africa is not for sissies. It means it's not for weaklings. And therefore, if one needs to do business in Africa, you need to have a tough skin to be able to exploit the opportunities that present.
Modise, we are in the midst of a pandemic. The pandemic has wreaked havoc in the whole world. A lot of things have changed. I would want to give you this opportunity to talk to our audience in terms of the general impact that this is going to have on the world economy. But then coming back to South Africa in particular, what is the impact? And I would want you to separate, when it comes to South Africa, the general economy as well as SMEs. What is the impact?
Okay, this is a moment that I believe will define the way we do business and the way we live going forward. This COVID-19 has really caught us with our pants down, as the saying goes,
Sure.
And if you look at the different sectors of businesses, in South Africa in particular, it's only the essential services that are operating. Most of what we term non-essential services have now gone quiet because of the lockdown. We have to stay at home and so forth and so on. A number of businesses have tried to get their people to work from home, which in itself is a bit of a challenge, but also presents opportunities. If you look at maybe starting with the small to medium enterprises, those who depend on a trade business, maybe selling of goods and services, social distancing has sort of killed that business. Those who are in the restaurant business, who made their living through selling of food and so forth, have also been impacted severely by that. The third type of impact has come in where people had to exchange goods and services, which in the lockdown rules are considered non-essential, like selling of technical services and so on. People who used to support in terms of desktop support and so on, they would come into your office, either your home office or whatever, to provide the technical service. All of those types of businesses in terms of COVID-19 have been severely impacted. And then if you look at the medium to large type of businesses, if you look at the large retailers, the wholesalers, especially those that are in the food business, they've been allowed to operate. And obviously, if you look at the full value chain from agriculture to the wholesaler or even the large retailer, that value chain has been allowed to operate. So people who are in that type of business have been maybe affected less than those who were in maybe the tertiary type of business. So going further, if you look at different types of industries, those who are in the mining industry or in some manufacturing industry have also been badly affected, because you have to go into the firm to produce a particular product. If you were in the clothing manufacturing business, you have to go into the business. Or if you are making this or that component, whether it's car or car parts and so on, you have to go physically into a particular space and do that. Some of the people use public transport to be able to go and produce those goods and services. And unfortunately, the public transport system has also been put under lockdown. So the impact, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world, has been quite difficult. We've seen how economies have shrunk. Predictions are between 9 to 15%, of shrinkage that has happened as a result of COVID-19. Yet, on the other side, it has given opportunities to some other types of business. For instance, those who are involved in telecoms, who provide services that we currently use, like data services, like connectivity, and so on, they are benefiting. And we've seen in South Africa through the Competition Commission that some of these businesses, whether be in large retailers and so on, have even increased their prices quite a lot, actually, to the disadvantage of those who use those goods and services. People who are in the medical supply space, they are allowed to operate, and therefore they continue to produce those types of goods and services, be pharmaceuticals, be the surgical masks that people use, the sanitizers, soaps, and so on. Those types of businesses still continue. So an agile entrepreneur could then begin to identify those types of sectors that have been allowed to operate and say, can I quickly turn around my business model or my, operational methods to be able to onboard these new opportunities that are coming on the horizon. For instance, if I used to make these types of clothing, can I then turn my manufacturing firm to produce, the masks that people need? Can I, convert, maybe the components that I've been producing, maybe for air conditioning, into the ventilators that are needed in hospitals and so on. So it is that agility as well, and the ability to identify those kinds of opportunities and be able to convert your business model or business operations to accommodate or onboard such opportunities. So there are threats that have come through, but also there are opportunities. We have seen, especially in South Africa, with the promulgation of the Disaster Act, that it has given government the opportunity to spend and to also inject money into the economy. So those types of opportunities have presented themselves. People who are in the food parcel distribution for the indigent and people who are destitute then come in. In terms of employment, people who have, training facilities to be able to train people, to go and do testing and so on. Some social entrepreneurs are coming on board and taking advantage of that. We have set up in South Africa what we call a with ability to do fund management, have been then taken on board to help manage some of these large funds that some foundations and government are putting together to be able to meet the need out there in the market. So you can see that there are various opportunities and also challenges or threats that come along with COVID-19. But it is very admirable to see how both business, labor, and government have come together, not only in South Africa, but across the globe, especially for the healthcare professionals, to provide them with what they need to be able to save lives. And we really salute them for those who are at the forefront of fighting this invisible enemy that the whole world is faced with.
Modise, thanks very much for that. My last question then would be, this platform is meant to inspire, motivate other entrepreneurs out there. Your last words, what words would you have for them? Motivation, inspiration, anything that you would want to say to our business people and entrepreneurs on the platform?
I would like to say that every dark cloud is always followed by a rainbow. These too shall pass. And whilst we are at home, we need to be reviewing our business operations and our business models, and also be involved in scenario planning, looking at various options to say, how is the world going to be post-COVID-19? Will my current business model or business opportunities that I've been chasing be applicable at that point in time? Do I need to tweak it here or there so that I remain relevant even when the situation changes? So it is an opportunity to reflect, and I want to encourage business people and current or prospective business business people and entrepreneurs to say, rethink the opportunity that you've been thinking about or chasing, and see how you can quickly deploy it once the restrictions are lifted. And also the fact that we were all able to operate from home, in terms of those who are running maybe large businesses in terms of property rentals and office space and so on, to say, will I lose my tenancy, or will it be reduced as a result of people have now learned to operate remotely instead of going into the office? Those who are providing transport systems to commuters who would move from home to the office and so on, that business model may be challenged going forward. We've seen the uptick in the Uber and the Taxify and so on. Is that business model still going to be relevant? Or people are now going to begin to work from home even post-COVID-19? So I'm saying, reflect on your business engagement or your business enterprise, see where you can tweak it, where you can reposition, and what other opportunities are coming up on the horizon, and what is it needed, or what's needed for you to take advantage of them. Look at capital raising opportunities that could be presenting on the horizon to say, how can I begin to prepare to be able to present my opportunity to funders out there? What is it that they require? What questions are they going to be asking post this COVID-19? And prepare, like a farmer who prepares the land, for the season of plowing. I think we are in that stage. And those who are better prepared are going to be the ones who will be the first of the starting lines once the restrictions are lifted. So I want to encourage them to spend a lot of time doing that preparation so that they are able to take off when the whistle is blown, as it were, in a race.
Modise, thank you very much once again. I'm very grateful for the opportunity you have afforded us to come onto the platform. You happen to be the very first South African to talk to us. We hope to talk to you once again soon.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. And I wish you and the rest of entrepreneurs and business people out there Godspeed.
Thank you very much.
Keep the faith.
Welcome.
You're welcome.